Hey everybody, I'm Will, and in this video I'm going to be making this awesome oak house sign. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned, that's all coming up right here on WH Creations. Just before Christmas, I was commissioned by a client to make a sign for their home. I asked if they could look online, see what kind of sign they preferred. They gave me some designs, but the main issue was that they were out of the way, and as such their property was hard to find for deliveries. Now at the time of our emails, I didn't have any usable oak available to me. I planned to have a day trip to the local woodyard, but when I invited my buddy Dave from Dave G Designs over to join me on the trip, he arrived at mine bearing some goodies. He had a few pieces he needed resawing, which for me is nice and easy with a record powered bandsaw, and to say thanks he provided me with an awesome slab of oak. This was cut and given to him by a tree surgeon friend and has been airing undercover for around 2 years. It had then been in his workshop taking up some space for the last 6 months. That saved the trip and took around 30 minutes to mill everything down to what you saw at the start of the video. I started by cross-cutting everything to size, and I wasn't going for any sort of measurements, just trying to get the most out of what I had. With the legs and the main board cut to size, I got out my thicknesser and started to get everything cleaned up. I wasn't too fussed about the legs as these will require some sanding later on, but the main board was pretty dirty with surface staining, so a few passes sorted this out. During the milling stage, I tried to keep everything as square as possible, so I didn't have to end up making a sled for this to go on. If your board has some warping to it, you will have to try and support it if passing for a thicknesser, as I did. Now the design I'm going for, and one that I instantly regretted when I did it, is to create a through mortise and tenon joint. I'll explain this a little bit more as you go through the video, but believe me when I say it was pretty much as soon as I made the mortise, I regretted it. So for the tenon part of this joint, I'll lay out some lines on the main board, first making the width of the tenon and then working out the suitable depth. To cut this, you can do it a few ways. Let's see.
TV card.
You can do it with the table saw if you have a suitable jig to help support the piece, or you could hand cut it with a saw and then use a chisel. The latter is the sort of thing that I learnt at school, when we weren't able to use the power tools for fear someone's fingers would be forced into the sander by someone else. And yes, that really did happen. But now I'm a big boy, and I get to play with big boy toys. So I decided to use the cross-cutting feature on my chop saw to hog out the majority of the material. If you've not done this before, it's pretty straightforward. I set up 2 blocks to act as a spacer away from the fence so you can cut the full distance, and 1 to stop the piece so I can get repeatable cuts. I can now go to town making multiple cuts to create the cheeks of the tenon. And because of the blocks we glued on, I can simply flip and rotate the piece, knowing that I'll always make the same cuts without having to mark everything. Super great, simple tip there, mate. Okay, that was meant to be a Smashy and Nicey reference, but it sounded more like a weird Australian / Scottish accent. Okay, I'll get me coat. To clean up the cheeks, I use a chisel to clean the large areas and then come back with my brand new record number 42 shoulder plane. I've only used this a handful of times, so when I can, I always love getting it out to play with, and it makes light work of tidying up the cheeks. With the tenons made, it's time to work on the mortise. Now again, this can be done using hand tools, drilling first to take out the majority of material and then cleaning up the sides with a chisel. But I don't want to be doing that. because I've recently come into possession of a mortising machine. If you think it looks like a drill press, you're sort of correct. The main difference being that it's got a bloody sharp square chisel attached. You can buy an adapter to turn your drill press into a mortiser, but I've not really heard that very many good stories involving them. So should you see one pop up on Marketplace or at a sale, then jump on one. This one was in pretty good condition, but I did have to do some work to it to get it to work how I wanted it to. I'm still learning with it, however, and did make mistakes. But hey, I'm learning, and as long as you can walk away and think, bloody hell, I messed that up, make sure never to do it again, then that's a good thing, right? So I marked out the area I wanted to mortise and got the machine set up, making out a line on the fence so I can once again flip, turn and make repeatable cuts nice and easily. And at the start of this video I said I made a mistake and instantly regretted it, and this is that bit. I chose to make through tenons, so the hole in the legs is going to go all the way through so the tenon is visible. I forgot to put a backer piece down first, so when the chisel cut through it blew out the wood surrounding it. In short, it looked a right mess, and it's something that I should have thought of, but alas I didn't. But it is a learning curve, and one that I will remember should I do it again. What I should have done is stop the mortise short, so it didn't go all the way through. There's a stop block that is on the side of the machine and would have helped. But hey ho, it's something that I'll just have to fix later on, no biggie. So to help make sure this lasts as long as possible in the great outdoors, I've made two toppers to put on the legs. Being end grain, they would soak up a lot of water and moisture and could then lead to breaking or splitting. This little cap, however, will help keep the water away from the end grain and should force any water away from the legs as it's slightly wider. Right, let's give the CNC lovers something to grin over. The client wanted their house name on the board, and this is easily done using my new 45-degree carbide bits. I do love the CNC, but just wished it was a little bit bigger. Ooh, said the nun to the vicar. Not much can be said about the CNC machining. It's pretty much hands off and hope it doesn't come loose, ruining the wood and the whole project because you don't have any replacement. Can you guess how nervous I was? Nah, only kidding. I'm amazing. With the board off the CNC, the client had asked that the letters be painted black. The easiest way to do this is to spray it. This is going to be something that I did off screen, as I thought it wouldn't really be that interesting, but slap me now because thinking about it, it's a really good tip. I sprayed the board with a couple of coats of spray lacquer first. Doing this will help stop the spray paint from seeping into the oak, thus creating #hours of fun trying to sand it back. Because I set myself up, I was able to remove the majority of the surface paint with a towel, and the rest didn't last long with 120 grit sandpaper in the orbital. I'm sorry, but that looks awesome and is super crisp too. I think we all know what sanding looks like, so I don't want to cause any trauma to any of you good people by watching me pass a sander over everything. I'm not going for a super smooth finish, this is going to be living outside, don't forget, and I want to get a couple of coats of Osmo exterior onto it, and Osmo doesn't do well with any high grip finish. So when Dave was helping me film, I told him about wanting to include dowels that would both help the aesthetic look of the finished piece and pull everything together, adding yet another layer of security. So let's do a poll. Would you do the same as me, putting dowels in to make the finished piece look nicer and giving it a longer existence? Or would you have gone with Dave's idea, not to include them and just use glue? Personally, I don't see why you wouldn't want to make your finished piece last longer, but let me know down in the comments what you would have done. The dowel was made off screen. To be fair, it would have been easier buying one, but I fancied 10 minutes off screen just to enjoy using a block plane, turning a square piece of oak into a round one. Seriously, give it a go for yourself. I marked out and drilled the holes in the legs. Once they were drilled out, I put everything together and marked out with a spade bit where to drill on the main board. Over at the drill press, I made sure to drill slightly off of this mark so the dowel really pulls everything together. Quick tip, sand a slight bevel on your dowel. This will help guide your dowel through the offset hole while tightening everything down. The only issue I had was offsetting this hole a little bit too much, so I had to go back and re-drill them to give me some extra clearance. I then messed up the other side by drilling it too loose. So make sure to overdo it and then work to where you want it. Don't forget, we can always remove material, but we can never put back on. With everything cut, milled and drilled, it's time for glue. Another classic moment was when I went to get my Gorilla polyurethane glue from my glue box, only to find that it had gone off. I mean, what's with that? It's only been in the box unused for the last 3 years. Ugh, useless. Luckily, however, when I was at Make Essential the first year, I was given an absolute bundle of these little trial sticks. Honestly, I had so many I gave a bag full of them to my dad, but thankfully I still had enough to last me this little glue up without the need to pop down the shops to pick up another bottle, which would inevitably sit in the box slowly curing. With the glue all over the joints and dowels and all over my hands, it was left to cure overnight in clamps, just to make sure that it was all secure. The next day I came back to find what could only be described as an expanding foam bukkake party all over the sign. Time to get the sander and chisels out and clean it all off. This didn't take overly long, and now I can see all the issues from the dowels and the mortiser. It was time to make it look sexy. Now I have used this trick before, but if you've not seen it, let me explain. Firstly, get yourself some CA glue. Any CA glue should work well for this, but I use the ones from Screwfix. They're super cheap and work really well for this exact process. Gluing pieces of wood together, or there are moments you want to glue bits of wood to your miter saw to act as a jig. Depending on how deep your hole or void is, place some glue into the void. Then you can either add sawdust for larger areas, or in this instance, run over with your orbital sander. The dust created from the sander will stick to the glue, and it will to some extent turn into a solid. Now you may need to go over this area a few times to make sure you don't have any micro pinholes, but once filled, spray on some activator and go over it again with a sander to finish it off. The CA glue acts like a fast setting epoxy, but with an almost instant effect that can be easily controlled. To clean up the mortise blowouts, I did the exact same thing, but being bigger holes, I filled it with more sawdust and larger bits of wood first. Drown this area in CA glue and hit it with activator. Go over the area with a sander again until it's filled to top it up. And that's it. Throw on a couple of coats of Osmo exterior and job's a good one. This does require a few coats, and I did this over 2 days, just making sure that the first coat had enough time to soak in. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I even got some time making it with my mate, which was even better. A huge thanks goes to my wife for filming me when Dave left me to go home, leaving me to finish it off by myself. I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, please consider subscribing, and if you've had #hours of fun, why not smash that thumbs up button? Obviously, if you didn't, I shall look forward to you telling me all about it in the comments. If you want to support the channel, are you aware I'm on Patreon? I'm still new to it as a platform, so if you have any ideas as to what you'd like to see on there if you do become a member, let me know down below or drop me an email. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya!